Hi everyone, welcome to People Week Night Class. I hope you're all doing well and you've had a good week and you've enjoyed the content from People Week. This week we are obviously talking about people, specifically around hospitality and team culture. You'd have listened to Yenny's conversation with me about team culture and how team culture gets built, working with Leon, working with E5 Bakehouse, working with Bao, all these businesses, brands that we know and love and admire, and really just interesting thinking about how it begins. And it begins with this incredible link between vision and then the behaviors that come from that vision. So I'm really looking forward to talking more about all of that tonight in night class. And specifically around the future of hospitality. Everything has changed in the last year. We were just talking about how the hospitality industry before COVID was already struggling and kind of like getting ahead of itself. And there was just like a feeding frenzy with restaurants opening all the time. We talked about it in the content last week of just people kind of mindlessly signing up for jobs, opening restaurants, not really knowing what they're doing, and a lot of failure and a lot of weaknesses. And COVID, if nothing else, has given us all an opportunity to really look at the foundations of a good business and what that requires. And obviously one of the things that's super important for making businesses work really, really well is a great team and looking after your people. And as we said in the lesson, that means starting with looking after your team first, and then looking after your customers, looking after your team to such an extent that they look after your customers in the way that you would like them to, looking after your suppliers, looking after your wider community. So we're going to be talking all about this sort of stuff the next hour and a half with my guest, Ravneet Gill, who is the pastry queen of the last year and probably many years to come. She began in the food industry working. First of all, she was doing a PhD. She was supposed to be doing a PhD in psychology, but she really just wanted to bake. And she broke away from what was expected of her and got into the pastry industry, working in kitchens all over the place. Through doing that, she got a real idea of what was working and what maybe wasn't working, and decided to set up Countertalk in her spare time. And anyone who's worked in kitchens knows that you don't have much spare time, so it's remarkable that she even began the thing. So her vision with Countertalk has been, she says, it's my mission to help more people understand and value great work environments. So Ravneet has not only released a book, the Pastry Chef's Guide, last year, that came out just before COVID. I think she was supposed to have her launch party, and obviously it didn't happen because it was in March. She has done, you might have seen her on the TV with Junior Bake Off. She's launched an online cookery school, which was a massive success last year. And she has relaunched Countertalk recently, which a lot of you have been talking about in the homework, which is really great to hear. So it's going to be really good talking to her about Countertalk. Let's bring her on. Ravneet, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you. What a nice introduction.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How's your day been?
It's been interesting. I've been doing a lot of homework and studying for this evening, actually.
You're incredibly diligent, Rav, and I really it's been really good working with you on this, just to kind of get a window into why you are as successful as you are, because you really just like do the work, get stuck in and like figure out what's going on. So thank you for engaging with it so much, and thank you for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you. I want to find out about what caused you to start Countertalk in the first place. I mentioned a bit about it, but I'd love to hear more.
Great. By the way, really quickly, I'm a massive fan of Curb, so thank you so much for having me. I started Countertalk because I've been there and done it, and I was working as a chef and a pastry chef for about 8 years, and I found that I didn't like my job most of the time. I loved what I was doing, but I hated the environments, and I sort of thought that I'd always be trapped in an environment that I didn't like, but I would sort of enjoy the food side of it, so it was okay. And then I was going to leave the industry, landed on my feet at a place called St. John, and it was meant to be like a little job to earn a bit of money, and I was applying for grad schemes in the evening to work in food. And then when I was at St. John, it was one of the first places where I felt like a human. You got treated with so much respect, and I would walk in every day so excited to be there. I would always describe it as that feeling as a kid of non-school uniform day, you know, that like excitement and feeling so free. And when I left St. John, so I decided to stay and be a chef. I then left St. John to go and work as a pastry chef in my dream job. I got my dream job in a bakery, and I was so excited to go and work with this iconic pastry chef. But when I got this dream job, it was awful. It was completely, my St. John bubble had been burst. And I realized and I remembered that actually kitchen environments are super tough. And not everyone cares as much about treating people properly as they say they do. And actually, it's so easy. So why aren't more people doing it? So I then went from I actually got fired from that bakery for speaking out too much about staff treatment. And then, and then I went into restaurant after restaurant, working as much as I could, sort of getting a feel for it. And I couldn't find as many good places as I thought there were in St. John. Was very tempted to go back, but I didn't. And then I landed in a few good places. And then I decided, you know what, we need to do something to shout about this and champion the good places. So what I did is I set up Countertalk, which initially was an Instagram page, and it was just a place to create awareness of all the good places, because I thought I want to save people the trouble of working in terrible places and highlight the good ones. So I ran events to get people involved and engaged and get small businesses together. And then after almost a year, I gathered up enough money to fund my first tech platform, which vetted companies based on how they treated people. And then people could apply through that website. I don't know if anyone saw it, but it was really basic. I then took it down when COVID happened because I couldn't keep it going monthly for the costs. But then I reinvested, and I now have brought it back a lot bigger and better, I hope.
Yeah, and it's been a really amazing relaunch. It's been really impressive just seeing how you've come back with a vengeance, and loads of the things that we've talked about in the course, just like getting the tone of voice right in your communications, really kind of like telling your story and telling the brand values, and it's really clear what you care about in everything that you say. And it's really nice for me seeing Countertalk, which is in many ways similar to Curb, in the fact that it didn't start as a business. It started as just an idea of like, this has got to change. How do we bring people together over this idea that, you know, you have? And I think they're the most, they're very compelling businesses, aren't they? Because they're grounded in principles that aren't necessarily to do with money, although you're going to figure out, obviously, ways to make money from it going forward. Rav, what do you think the disconnect is? Because we're going to be talking about this in the homework. It's very easy to sit there at the beginning of your business journey and go, I want this kind of team, and I want everyone to be super invested and really happy, and I'm going to do all these amazing trips and everything like that. What do you think the disconnect is between the image that you see? So, for example, your dream bakery that you wanted to go and work in, it's not a bakery, but yeah, the dream workplace that you wanted to go to, and it looks from the outside like everything that you could ever have hoped for. But then the reality is totally different. So it's all very well talking to people about, conveying your brand and, talking about your values and stuff. What do you think the disconnect is between that and actually it being the lived reality of the people that work there?
Well, I think things like brand values are a hot topic to so many people, and everyone's sort of running around saying that they need to nail down their values. However, there's a massive disconnect between companies who have their brand values and who actually practice them. And I think in the past, when I was coming up through the industry, it was very easy to hide that, because you could just sort of get away with treating people awfully, because when it actually came to it, they were not putting any money into the people side of it, more so just projecting an image on social media. However, as the years have gone on and people have started to realize that you can't get away with things like that, and a lot more people speak out, I think it's so much more important now to make sure that your brand values are reflected in what it is that you do. So actually putting money into people and training and getting people to reflect what it is that you're trying to preach.
Yeah, absolutely. It's training, it's investing in people. Like we said earlier, like you invest in your equipment, you have to invest in your people, even more than in your equipment, although you do need your equipment as well to work. So what is the mood right now amongst the Countertalk community in February 2021?
I think interestingly, and I guess quite sadly initially, when COVID first happened, I ran it I sort of kept it going for 2 months, and I did some coffee mornings, because there were quite a few people who were let go of their job immediately when COVID happened. Business owners panicked and let go of their staff as their first port of call, which I actually think has distilled a massive level of distrust between employees and employers. Some of those employers brought them back to furlough them, but some didn't, which I think was really unfortunate. And I think at first there was so much distrust and also instability for a lot of employees, but also looking on the other side, so many employers were panicked. And I think we've got to give compassion to both sides. It's really easy to sort of label one as the worst one, but everyone didn't know what was going on. We'd never been in this situation before. So there was so much distrust from an employee point of view, but also there was a lot of scared business owners who were losing their livelihoods and things that they built up over years. So I think after a few months where we sort of realized that this was going to go on for a bit longer, a lot of those employees actually used this time to empower themselves. And I have seen so many incredible people either start their own businesses or go and do the thing that they've loved more, which might be a different side of the food world, or taking up side jobs with other companies. And actually companies like Big Night, so Charlie from the Laughing Hearts started up Big Night because he found the delivery platforms really stressful and difficult to use. So he took it in his own hands. And he actually said that employing people during COVID was one of the best times to employ people because he got his pick of the bunch, which I think is super interesting. And now we're at a point where those employees have had all this time to lay low and almost like recharge, and everyone now knows what it is that they want. So I don't think it's as, almost sad as it was this time last year. People are feeling a bit more rejuvenated.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think what you're talking about as well is about people having taken a bit of time out, whether it's from, being furloughed or whether it's from companies going, hang on, this wasn't working, and being a lot more mindful about where they want to put their energy going forward. And that's something I'm really excited about. Like we said, as hellish as it's all been, I'm really excited about the opportunities that it's going to throw up and the people, the new kinds of faces that it's going to bring into our industry, and that will be probably hopefully looking for jobs for all of you guys out there, with all of you guys out there who are ready building your kind of like dream companies with your fantastic visions and everything that are going to attract such great people. There's going to be a huge pool of really great people that are looking for the right kind of place to put their energy. So Rav, what do you think makes a great work environment? Who is doing it well?
Well, I think multitude of factors. I mean, industry-wise, I've worked in so many places, from like production kitchens to restaurants to catering in rich people's houses. And I've also done the street food thing. I've done offsite catering, you name it. And I actually think it doesn't necessarily have to be with like environment physically. I think so much of it comes from the way you talk to one another and your company values and ethics. At St. John, it was massively around like giving you your rota a week in advance so you could have your own life and know what to do on your days off. Having that control back is massive. Whereas when I worked in restaurants where you get your rota on the Sunday and find out for the Monday, you couldn't make any plans. So you felt like you were not in control of your own life. And that can play with people over time. And also having a lot of structure. Onboarding is really important to me, the way you onboard a staff member, which we can talk about later, actually. I think it's really interesting. And feeding people. You've got to feed them, right, Petra?
Yeah, you've got to feed them. It's so easy to do. It's like, even just without your team, just food gets you everywhere. I mean, it's amazing just how many doors it opens. When I have my chocolate van, just handing a policeman a couple of brownies, he doesn't give me or like parking warden doesn't give me a ticket or whatever. Like, you can get away with so much it's so easy. You've already got it, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in homework, but feeding people decent food, not just the pasta. Like Debbie Shembry talked about this in her homework, not just as a big bowl of pasta that anyone, it's like feeding your kids, like feeding really good food so that people can really enjoy it. I think Pump Street Bakery do this really well. I hear about them doing these really amazing like summer dinners for all their team and getting really great wine in and really just like brilliant food so that everyone can understand this is our standard. This is what we all deserve, and therefore this is what everybody deserves. I think it's a really important message to send to, as to what you feed people. I totally agree. what do you like? We've spoken a little bit about this, but how do you see the changes that are coming about in terms of how hospitality businesses are operating in this new era that we're in?
Well, I think a lot of companies have had to wise up a bit and see that their model perhaps wasn't working properly before. I spoke before we joined this about staffing and how you've got to really value employees now. It's kind of got to a tipping point where staff are going to be choosy about where they work because they've had time to reflect and see what's important to them. A lot of staff might be willing to take a bit less money for a bit more free time and a nicer company to work for, which I think is we haven't had that in years, that sort of flipping mindset. So I think leveraging that is great. People care a lot more about where their stuff comes from, don't they, supplier wise? And I think a lot of businesses maybe will slow down. Companies were opening at rapid speed before lockdown, and I think it was a bit silly. I think, so I think now people are really, really tested on whether they want to actually have a physical location or not, which is very interesting.
Yeah. There's an article that we put in the lesson last week that it takes a very long time to read. It was written last March in the Counter. Could be a sister company for you. It's absolutely fascinating about just like how unsustainable it was something like the restaurant industry is on life support, and this was like written back in early March of last year before really things had properly kicked off, and just it was such an interesting reminder reading it. So if you haven't read it, everyone, you should definitely read it. Just how weak the industry already was, and it's sort of talking about the States, but you could just as easily be talking about the UK, and just how much. Like all fur coat and no knickers, as my mum says, just like there's a lot of upfront stuff, but not a lot of substance to a lot of the businesses. And it's going to be really interesting seeing the ones that remain. And it's really interesting for you guys to all think about what are the businesses that you're observing that are remaining and standing strong. What is it that they're doing, and really paying attention to that. And the same with street food businesses, but for all sorts of different reasons as well, about government support and people just not being able to continue and not, getting the support that they need. But who is going to remain, who's going to diversify, and who's going to, unfortunately go out of business. There's a lot of people going out of businesses, a lot of them not through any fault of their own, but just really interesting to observe what is it that they're doing that's enabled them to do that. So what do you think, Rav, are the main things that people are looking for out of their working life?
I think people really want to love what they do. I think one of the most unique things about the food world is most people do it because they love food and they love eating and they love everything about it. Whereas, when you tell someone you work in food, everyone gets really excited because a lot of people are usually jealous of that. So I think when it comes to what people are looking for, somewhere that they love working as much as they love their passion, which is food. It's a passion-driven job. So I think giving people a place where they can love the food and love what they do, love coming to work, and also learn. A lot of people in the food world just want to learn. And I think they offset that and sacrifice sometimes pay for what they can do in a learning sense, because it's very much an accessible environment. Anyone can sort of join, which I think is beautiful about hospitality. So yeah, I think people care a lot about learning and growing and like being passionate. I think creating a passionate work environment is key.
Yeah, and feeling like a human being, feeling like you're valued, feeling like you matter. I mean, it's the sort of fundamental, I'm always talking about this, but the fundamentals that you're here, that you're heard, that you are part of something, that you're part of something, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's why so many people want to move to the country, why so many people want to set up communes and stuff at the moment. They're realizing that so much of modern day city life, where you're living in, like dormitory, apartment buildings, they're not fit for purpose in the age of having to spend a lot of time in your home and everything. You need to be around people. You need to feel part of something, even if it's literally just going to your local shop and then recognizing you or whatever. I mean, I'm really interested in St. John. You've talked about it a bit. like, what do you, and I was going to ask you, what creates the greatest investment in employees in a business? And again, I'm thinking, will St. John do that really well? How intentional do you think? I mean, they've been around for a long time, haven't they? What, 30 years?
Yeah, maybe even longer. Maybe,
yeah, I think. Yeah, a bit longer. And I know, you know, they talk about the early days when they opened up in Clark and in Farringdon, and they, you know, everyone thought they were mad, and that it really wasn't very popular in the beginning, and they've obviously had a long time to hone it all. But what do you think have been? I know you weren't around then. You weren't even born then. But like, what was going on? Do you think what do you think the thread is? I mean, I want to say it's the owners, but like, what? I'd love to hear you talk about that.
I mean, I think it's really interesting what you just said about people just wanting to be heard. I think that's one of the things that we underestimate. Everybody just wants to be heard and feel like they've been seen. And you get that at St. John because it's a team that really cares and almost like loves being around each other. So Fergus Henderson, one of the owners, the thing I like love the most about it is he's really famous and everyone loves him. And we'd have people coming on work experience who'd literally cry when they saw him. But the thing I love the most about him is he's not inaccessible. He would walk in every day in the morning and grab a drink and walk up to you and say hi, and you wouldn't feel that you couldn't approach him, even to have a little chat. He was willing, and I think that was that nature of Fergus being open to talk to anyone filtered down into the whole system. There wasn't a hierarchy where you felt like you couldn't say something to someone. And then equally, the head chef, Jonathan, at the time, he's still there, would also make you feel like that. He would always come and ask me about my personal life in a really loving way, check that everything was okay, but not in an intrusive way. But it made you feel like you were really part of something. And if you had something going on, they were so understanding about it, rather than like treating everybody the same, humanizing us. So yeah, and like one of the things I loved was every day, twice a day, especially if you're on a double shift, you'd sit down, and they call it family meal, and you'd all sit and eat delicious food together. And everybody, front of house, back of house, staff, like in the bar and in the office, would sit on this long table and eat together and talk and have conversations. And I think that was really, really key to everybody working as a team.
Yeah, it's so civilizing. It's like the beginning of civilization took place by sitting around together and eating, right? And it's such an important but often overlooked thing to remember. And I think just with, you know, what you've just said about the owners of St. John, I think it's really powerful, and I think it's really great to just remember that food is this incredible leveler. And it's definitely why I've always been so interested in street food, because if you put good food on the streets, then everyone has access to it. No one owns the streets, and therefore everyone feels like they belong on the streets. And you could say the same about sitting around a table together with everybody in the team, no matter what position they're in. And I think it's definitely a big thing for me with Curb. Like, one of our values is people-centric, and we talk about treating the janitor and the CEO just the same. And we've got a big poster of Trading Places in our office. And I don't know who's seen the movie Trading Places, but it's my favorite movie. And it's all about that, right? It's just like no one's any better than anyone else just because you're earning a massive amount of money in the bank or whatever, and you think you can look down. It's not about that. It's just like, actually, we're all the same when it comes down to it. And isn't food the most brilliant way of doing that? So therefore, if you are going to be in the food industry, it's like really, it's just a really easy thing to remember, to do that, to find a way to be together and enjoy the food that you also care so deeply about together. And just, you know, remember that. I think the tricky thing in street food and in probably lots of kitchens as well is like the panic. It's just like the immediacy. It's like, no, we've got to go, we've got to do service now, and then we're tired, and then we're leaving, or we're having drinks or whatever. And that's one way of bonding, but just like the actual before service eating together, and how that works in street food is probably a bit more complicated because it is just so like on the fly. But think of ways that you can do it if you're getting into street food, or if you're opening a restaurant. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more controlled, but I think that's just so powerful. It's like that's almost like a number one thing to just find a way to do.
Yeah, and I think for street food, whenever I've worked on street food stalls, you don't have to obviously all sit down and eat, because I know it's a lot more fast paced and everything is different. But having like a 10-minute coffee with your staff in the morning and having a bit of a briefing and a debrief kind of stops your staff from then sort of struggling throughout the morning. I always found that 10-minute morning reset, caring about what they did the night before, and then jumping into it is a really good thing to do.
Yeah, a huddle, daily huddle. So we're going to go on to homework in a second. I want to just ask one more question. What advice, Rav, would you give to new food business owners thinking about hiring, maybe for the first time?
Well, I think definitely spend some time to figure out what it is that you want from that person and be realistic about it. Because often, especially at Countertalk, we work with employers who send in job specs that are so unrealistic for the pay. So definitely put yourself in the employee's position and see, is it feasible for what it is? Can you strip some of those things back? And also making sure, sorry, I've actually written notes about this because I've got a whole article on Countertalk about how to write a good job ad and if the job is feasible or not. I love talking about these things. And yeah, definitely putting yourself in the employee's position is one of my main takeaways when you're writing a job ad and when you're looking for someone. And then also don't be afraid of handing things over that you're not very good at. I think sometimes, and the worst advice I ever got was from a head chef who said, if someone asks, I was a sous chef, he said, if someone asks you a question and you don't know, just say you'll come back to them. Instead of just admitting, I don't know the answer to that. So I think there's strength in hiring in areas where you don't know things and not being afraid of that.
Yeah, sure thing. Right, we're going to go on to homework now. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about as we go through the homework. Thank you everyone for sending it in. It was really good to hear about it, even though obviously a lot of this might feel like a long way away. I know some of you are really ready to start and some of you are still sort of figuring out quite a lot of stuff with your businesses before you start. But I think it's just really good in terms of linking the actual hiring of people to why you want to run your business in the first place. And as we keep on saying, vision, which will dictate the behaviors that you're going to see amongst your team. And it all comes from you. So we asked in the homework, number one, what kind of team do you want? Number two, how are you going to find your team? Number three, how will you communicate your company vision to them? Number four, what kind of behaviors would you like to exist in your business that support your vision? Number five, what are you planning on paying? And number six, what benefits would you like to offer? So we are going to, we've pulled out some of the key responses that some of you said quite similar things as well. So we're just going to pull out some of them. We're going to go through each of the questions and use it as a jump off point for discussion of your homework. So what kind of team do you want? So Anil from Bombay Talkies said they should engage actively with customers to ensure that they get the best experience possible while waiting in line and being served. And me and Rav were talking about this earlier. It's and it's something I talked about in the content, but just how often you go to a place, whether it's a market or the counter of a cafe or whatever, and you might be in a really big queue, but no one's really engaging with you. And a lot of the time people don't even look at you. And I think people don't really mind queuing as long as they feel like, again, they're being seen and heard in some way, even if it's just a sort of looking up at you and going, yeah, I see you, I'll be with you in a second or whatever. But the number of times when you'll have a wall of people working behind the counter, all in their like matching aprons, all kind of like ready to serve people if only they'd come closer to the counter, and yet that you'll see other people out there kind of bringing people in, not in a kind of pushy way, because there is a fine line between being like accommodating and being like off-putting, and sort of, you know, we've all been there and seen people shoving things in our faces, and it's just a massive turn off. But just really thinking about, you know, the sort of permeability of your counter, and you don't have to just stay on the cooking side of it. You can get out, you can talk to people, you can make them feel part of the whole thing and make it all a little bit more fun. Rav, what experience do you have with this?
Well, I think when I've done a lot of restaurant openings, and I've been on the side of briefing the team and the team not having any idea. And I think one of the most basic and things that you can do as a company is brief your staff so that they know what it is that they're selling and why, so they get sold to the idea and all they want to do is sing about it. And I think that trickles down into, if they feel well respected and treated well and that they're on this journey with you, all they're going to want to do is shout about it to the customer. And then it all comes back in circles, doesn't it? Because then the customer buys into your vision and it just keeps feeding each other.
Yeah. And again, like, just back to street food, you talk about hospitality in restaurants a lot and the kind of service style and front of house and everything like that. You can still do all of that, even if you're serving someone, a lunchtime bap. It's all possible. It's just remembering that you are offering a service and that you're delivering hospitality and that people come to you no matter where you're buying, whatever it is you're buying, for an experience. And the more, I always talk about the restaurants that you might have had the best food in the world, but the service might have left you feeling cold. And whereas you forgive so much, and this is especially important when you're thinking about starting out and you're making a lot of mistakes. I mean, we're all making mistakes all the time, but like, you're making a lot of mistakes, especially in the beginning. People will forgive it if you're a bit human and a bit engaging and making them feel part of your journey of mistakes. I always talk about, again, I'm sorry to all the people who have like overly branded uniforms and everything right from the beginning. Nothing wrong with it at all, but some people focus too much on that, too much on the look and not enough on the experience. And the number of times where you just kind of, you go up and it's all just a bit kind of stiff, whereas a lot of times you go to a business and they haven't got their uniforms together. It doesn't matter. You can see that as a customer and you can kind of see that they're just starting and you kind of want to be part of them succeeding. It kind of enables you a little bit more of a window, a sort of room to kind of get in there and be part of that journey. So,
and I think so when you're a small business, and I've seen this so much, all people, the human nature of most people is, all people want to do is have this like best kept secret of a business that they love. And it could be your street food stall that they come to and they think it's the best thing ever. But at being humans, we don't keep our mouths shut. So all we then do is talk about this incredible street food that we had to all of our friends. And word of mouth is your most powerful tool when it comes to growing small business, I think, anyway. That's how we did it with Puff. And you make it feel like you're everyone's best kept secret, but really all they do is talk about it to all their friends. So if you can make the experience so incredible that all they do is talk about it, it's win-win.
Exactly. And just there's no gesture that's too big, as long as it's coming from a place of, honesty and authenticity to what you're feeling like. Debbie talks about this in one of the homework bits that we'll come to, but she talks about, how will you communicate your company vision to them? And Debbie says, this may sound silly, but I aim on just being myself, because apparently when I do, and when I talk about my vision and the business, my eyes light up and I get all excited and passionate. I want that enthusiasm to rub off and be catching. For me, cooking is so much more than picking out food or making money. It's about making people happy in the 20 minutes they have to indulge and forget about life for a bit. And I think it's just such a wonderful, just like it can be really easy to kind of overcomplicate things, but it's as simple as that a lot of the time. It's just, do you love what you're doing? And can you convey that through your enthusiasm? And if so, take St. John as an amazing example of this, then you're off to the races.
Exactly. And that's why they have like a worldwide audience that always talks about the St. John sort of experience, because the staff are trained so heavily on everything. And also they all get to eat everything, which I think is great. If you're running a street food stall, give your staff the stuff that you're selling so that they can be like, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to tell everyone about my favorite dish on the menu. Give them samples of everything. That's also very powerful.
Exactly. Get them high on the supply and drinking the Kool-Aid and able to describe it. Just simple stuff like describing it. God, how often have we all been to a place where we're like, oh, what's this like? And they're like, I don't know. And you
I
just
know,
think,
I can't stand that.
and it's such a letdown. Or you ask somebody, how did this business start? And they don't know. And it's like no one at any point has sat down with this person and explained the story of how this business that's had so much work put into it came to be. It's unbelievable. And we talked about this a bit in last week's lesson, but just and we'll come to this, but just onboarding, just telling people what the hell this is and why it matters and why you care about it and why you care about who you're hiring. So back to what kind of team do you want? Book from Tantuni says, of course, skills are also important, but wanting to learn and humility in learning and enthusiasm is always a lot more important to me. I'm always open to teach someone anything they would like to learn from me if they are open to learning. And I think this comes down to the hiring process and really thinking about what kind of people you would like to hire and therefore what kind of questions you're going to need to ask. What do you think about this, Ralph?
Sorry, I just had a mum shouting outside.
Oh.
I'm on the spot. What's your question, Petra? Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just asking. So Book was talking about how learning and humility in learning and enthusiasm is always really important for her. So skills obviously are important, but the desire to learn and the ability to have humility in learning and enthusiasm is always a lot more important to me. And I was just saying that, when you're going out to hire people, you really need to think about what kind of people do you want to hire? What kind of skills? Yes, obviously, what kind of skills do you want them to have? But what are you looking for? And making sure that you you ask really great questions when you're hiring people. Like, what is your experience of the hiring process and how that is changing?
Well, I think that in hospitality, a lot of companies fall short when it comes to hiring. And then that can lead to a whole cycle of poor staff retention. And staff retention is massive when it comes to consistency of product and a consistency in your returning customer base, right? And they all feed into each other. So actually onboarding and finding the right staff is so key to what it is that you're doing. And I was talking to the Countertalk team today, actually, because we were talking about pay and how everyone in the Countertalk team, by the way, has worked in the industry, so they know what it's like. And we all talk about, actually, if we know that we're going to learn a lot from this company, we're more likely to stick around and we're more likely to take a bit less money because we're offsetting the fact that we're learning. So I think there's a lot of power in knowing what you can teach people, but also don't overpromise and then underdeliver, right? So think about what it is that you can teach and factor that in with time, because the worst is when you sort of take a job and someone's said that they'll teach you everything, then you join and then you say, hey, 6 months later, when are we going to learn that thing? And it doesn't happen. So definitely considering that before you promise it, I think is very, very important. And when you hire somebody, definitely if you onboard them correctly, and that is, through putting things in place. Ruth Penfold from so basically, sorry, really quickly, I held a talk on onboarding 2 years ago in real life, and we got a lady from Onfido, which is like a tech company, to talk to us about how they onboard, because we fall short in hospitality. She spoke about writing love letters to your staff before they join, and that is like, hey, here's your contract, this is what you need when you start, and then hey, we're looking forward to having you, this is a bit more about us. And you like keeping in contact before they start is going to breed some sort of consistency and reliability in them, so they're going to feel a lot more comfortable when they join. Whereas a lot of the time you get hired and they say, oh yeah, turn up at 10 o'clock. You turn up at 10 o'clock and they say, oh, you're meant to be here at 8, or something silly like that. So onboarding sets people off on the right foot. And I know with street food, it can be really hard because sometimes it's a lot of temps that you're getting in, right? And that can be really, really tricky. So I think building up a set of temps that want to stick around is important, and you do that by onboarding properly.
Yeah, and just having your story down pat. So even if it is just like those 10 minutes, like, hi, you know, Keith, welcome to the team. We're going to have our coffee. You demonstrate how you roll. We're going to have our coffee now. Come and join us. We were just talking about blah, 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 and just bring them into the atmosphere of your company. You know, it's something that you can convey. You know, we spoke about it a few weeks ago, just in so many things, in semiotics, like just in so many just little things. It doesn't have to be specifically how much you pay and specifically what kind of food you're doing, and you know, all the kind of like obvious things. It's just like how you greet somebody, how your team greet a new person when they're coming in. Have they even been told that you're coming in? You know, and again, it is difficult because it can be quite, you know, fly by the seat of your pants in street food. I mean, extremely so, which is why it's so important to just get this embedded in your business plans. Even if you're only having the business plan in your brain, just like really think about the sort of the fundamentals of humanity, which is to feel like want to feel like you're part of something and want to feel like there's a point to you being there. Because there's nothing worse than, and we've all been there, we've all worked in all kinds of things in hospitality, where you just turn up and it's like, oh yeah, you know, there's your black and white uniform, wear your black tights, go and, you know, deal with that dauphinoise potatoes, and it's just all a bit depressing. On to Enrico from Elisabetta's Wood-Fired Lasagna. Enrico says, I would like to foster diversity and inclusion in team with no age limit, ethnicity, religion, or whatever boundaries. And I really like this, Enrico. I think it's a really great sentiment, because, you know, hospitality, especially in this country, is such a young person's game. We don't have so many, we do have some, but we don't have so many of the career hospitality gems that you get in like the States or in Italy or whatever. And I mean, there's diversity, of course, but just, it would be so nice to just for diversity to really mean all sorts of different things. What do you think, Rav?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the way forward, especially when it comes to street food. You guys are so lucky because you benefit from flexible working, which is what a lot of people, like new mums, would really love, and a lot of parents. So I think, you know, often they get excluded from a lot of full-time restaurant hospitality jobs because they can't make the hours work. So a company like Corbin and King have implemented a scheme where people over 50 can work, and they have set hours already designed to make them feel more comfortable, because it's a very physical job, right? So they factor that into those hires and how they word that application, which I think is powerful. And they also have a completely different scheme for mothers who can tailor a job around picking up their kids. So I think it's the way that we're moving forward. A lot of big companies are doing it, and it will trickle down. But with street food, you guys are very lucky because it's, you know, flexible work, and that's very attractive.
Yeah, and certainly in street food, there are a lot of female-run businesses, and a lot of mums, you know, juggling it all. So it's kind of like pushing against an open door. There's a lot of like space for that already. So do consider the mums in your hiring process. I really like this from Kira from Sugar Rush. She says, we want to be the type of people that have a 5-star rating. We want the type of people that have a 5-star rating on Uber and can recall the best conversations they had on a night home. And I think this is a really great way of thinking about it. It's always really good to think about when you're imagining, you know, hiring, when you're imagining company culture, when you're imagining any of your behaviors, just the visual cues of thinking, oh, we're going to be like this, and everyone knows what it feels like to be in an Uber ride, and kind of, you know, the whole 5-star rating thing, and why you would want to give someone a 5-star rating, and imagining that for yourselves with your team. What do you think, Rav?
I love the 5-star rating sort of analogy. I think it's so important to work around people that you get on with as well. The worst is, like, especially when you're working in your early days, spending your entire day with someone you don't like is not fun. So
yeah, and it creates that and I think, you know, Kira, you talk about this in the rest of your homework, just this kind of like incentive, this carrot to be like, no, I want to be that guy in this team. I want to like really smash it, smash the old hospitality levels in this thing, and get that rating, whether it's a real rating or not. So, okay, on to the next question. Number 2, how are you going to find your team? Loads of you mentioned Countertalk, which is fantastic. So Rav, I think for anyone that knows about Countertalk, I think the impression of it might be that you only work with established businesses and restaurants and places that hire lots and lots of people, whereas we're talking to people who might only be hiring 1 or 2 people in the beginning. How would you like to be approached? What do you think would happen if a brand new business comes to you? Do they already come to you? How does it work?
So I think initially when it first started, it was very much established restaurants coming to us, purely because I think the price point of the ads, because we charge per ad to fund the tech side of it, they were quite high, in my opinion, and I didn't want them to be so high, but they were. So what we've done coming back with Countertalk, because we really want to be accessible, we're very much accessible on a staff level, but we want to make it accessible on an employer level as well. We've lowered the fee completely. So we've undercut Gumtree, which is great. So it's affordable for most businesses now. And we've got, I think even doing that initially, we've had so many small businesses reach out to us and say that they love to advertise with us now because it's something that they can afford. It's like 70 quid an advert or something. And also if you're a first time business, we offer you a free ad first. We also do a lot of work with getting the small businesses to talk to each other on the Countertalk Instagram page. I'm not sure if anyone's seen that, but we do a networking Sunday where we get everyone to start helping each other, because with Countertalk, it's not just about, posting your ad up and leaving it to them. It's about getting involved with the community. And it could actually be that through an Instagram networking conversation that you have with someone, you find someone there. And we're totally okay with that, by the way. If anything, we advocate for it because we want people who believe in Countertalk to sort of join the mission and then all become a part of a community. So we're really here for people who are small businesses, big businesses. As long as you share our vision of just wanting to get people into jobs where they feel happy, then we're happy.
Yeah, and you do that really well. It's really impressive the way you guys just bring together so many different strands around this common goal of great hospitality and a great work environment. By the way, everyone, I know there's lots of nice comments in the comments. If you have any questions, make sure you put them down because we're going to leave lots of time for questions with Rav. So chuck them in and we will get to them shortly. Right, so back to the homework. Is this a fun homework? I hope this is a more fun homework than you've had in the past. So how are you going to find your team? Book says, I believe that when people already follow you on social media, they already have a sense of you and your team. So when they actually see an ad on social media, they know exactly if they feel that they will be the right fit. So we could talk about what we were talking about earlier with this, which was that, it's easy to think a business and then to get there and be disappointed, as with you, Rav, and as with, I think, most of us in the world. But at the same time, there are companies and their personality and their values and their whole vibe just bounces off the screen at you. Rav, you've got a lot of experience in this. You do what you do incredibly well. What would you say about this? Do you see a lot of this happening?
Hiring through social media? Is that
yeah?
I think social media has become so much more powerful than it ever has been before. And I think if you're a small business and you haven't started up your social media now is the time, because you're never going to find a more powerful time in history where everyone is focused on their phone. So even if it's your Instagram page that you want to start and your business hasn't started, start it right now. And I think with social media, a lot of businesses, big ones, big shiny ones, miss the mark, because they go shiny, they go professional photos and low engagement. However, it's way more powerful and important to grow small and get high engagement. So talk to your customers, start getting a dialogue, care about them, take care of them, invest in your socials, because though that engagement rate will translate into customers who care about you, who want to shout about you, who then will send that job ad to a friend that they know because they say, hey, I love so-and-so's socials. They look like a great place to work. You should work there. So don't underestimate social media, especially at this time. I think it's very, very powerful and an important tool to be using.
Yeah. And that you create investment. People are invested in you and your success, and they want to feel part of the growth of that success. I mean, you see it all the time. And also you see people that, you might be talking to on social media who are a customer, but they're like, oh, I'm kind of looking for a change. And it's just about having the pathways open to have those conversations. The number of people, I'd say, it's such a huge part of Curb is like, we're in the business of people looking for a change. And whether that's people who come to us who've already got their business idea, or people who come to us who are, customers going, I just want to eat a different kind of food. And actually, I might give it a go. Like we always talk about Theo, who's set up Slinger, that we talked about in the lesson. He used to work in the city, and he'd sit in his building looking down at our gherkin market, and he'd see the rib man and the rib man's massive queue that he used to have, and he'd be like, oh, I want to be down there, I want to be part of that. And eventually he had the guts to quit his job and do it himself, and then came and worked with us. And it's just recognizing it, whether it's social media or whether you see it happening live, just like things that make you feel excited and give you that bliss feeling. You've got to follow that as much as you possibly can. So another one from Book, as we move on to how will you communicate your company vision to your team. So I really love this. Our company vision is simple, making it a fun and enjoyable experience for all customers, like taking a short, fun and delicious trip to Turkey. And then Book goes on to say, for number 4, which is what kind of behaviors would you like to exist in your business that supports your vision? I want staff to interact with customers in a welcoming way, like we welcome friends and family to our homes in Turkey, smiling and making everyone feel welcome, like they are entering a new yet familiar space. Like, I just feel lovely when I read that, because it makes me feel reassured. It makes me feel like I'm entering a family. I'm getting access to a culture. It's so much of the kind of like value of a business is like enabling people to connect with your culture, whether that's specifically a nationality or whether that's just the way you roll or whatever it is, but just like you're helping people to access what you do. And you read so much. I mean, I was reading, there's this great magazine called Whetstone, which is all about, food cultures around the world. And I was reading it at the weekend, just talking about, the making of Iraq, for example, and people just wanting to, and there was a really wonderful article. I'll post a link to it, but there's this really wonderful article about Angolans, African, a lot of them who kind of came through the Civil War and stuff, who live in Lisbon in Portugal, and cooking their Angolan food and having their cantinas that do it, and just it being really, really important to them to continue the traditions, because they were so nearly wiped off in Civil War or whatever it was, but just like feeling very committed to the idea of continuing your cultural traditions. And I think this is just really nice, and especially Book, with everything you've already said about bringing Turkey and showing people that Turkish street food is more than a doner kebab. It's just, and it's a really great visual and sort of soulful cue to give your team, to kind of let them know, this is how we behave in my family, in my country, and this is what we want to convey to other people. Rav, can you think of anyone who's doing that really well?
I don't know. I mean, I think that having a really strong culture and values in that sense always translates to a restaurant. I mean, I love nothing more than going to a small family-run restaurant and feeling like I've been hugged the whole evening. And I'm trying to think of somewhere right now, but I can't off the top of my head. But I remember when Gunpowder first started, and it was tiny back in the day. And it was so lovely going in there because everyone really cared and loved it. And obviously it's gotten bigger and it's still great. But I think Dishoom actually do a great job of making you feel like you're on this like little journey with them when you step in through the door. I do love Dishoom.
Yeah, and they famously do that. Like, they famously spend time with their team and spend time on the onboarding and take their team off on amazing trips and invest in them. And there's this whole thing with them, Seva, which is all about service. and everyone getting that into their brains, and just really kind of taking it on board for themselves and wanting to perform this amazing act of service in your work. And they're the kite mark. I mean, we always talk about them at Curb, like, how can we be more like Dishoom? They're so brilliant at doing what they do and conveying this incredible living and breathing and conveying this incredible company culture. I think is just just remarkable. So everyone just think about, and we said this in the interactive session, where have you been where you've got really memorable service and hospitality, and what was it that they did? And it can be such small things. You know, we talk about laniap, Rav, which is a Creole word, and it's used, this word, in Trinidad and in different islands in the Caribbean, but it's used in New Orleans a lot, and it means a little bit of something extra for free. And just kind of thinking about laniap in the way you approach your customers and even your team, right? Just kind of things that they weren't expecting. You know, we talk about not over promising and under delivering. Like, under promising and over delivering is so powerful.
Yeah.
And just, you know, laniap is just a really, and we talk about it a lot at Curb, whether it's someone who's, you know, just been really lovely and we give them a free pint or whatever. There's so many ways that you can do that just don't cost you much and just deliver so much impact to the person receiving it.
Yeah, and at Countertalk, we actually focus a lot on the perks and benefits side of your business, because we really understand that in hospitality, you can't always pay loads, but sometimes you can give really cool perks that you would never get in another job. So we really encourage businesses to think about those perks. It could be, often, you know, as a company, you have ties with all these suppliers because you order from them a lot. So you can speak to your suppliers and say, hey, can I send so-and-so on a trip to your farm to have a look at how everything's done? And it, you know, all that sort of stuff is so fun. And you wouldn't get that in a regular job. Or coffee suppliers giving your team a day coffee training somewhere. All of those things, you've got to think about what you can do to go the extra mile.
Yeah, and then you're working with suppliers who are presumably incredibly passionate about what they're doing. And so you don't have to ask them twice to kind of come and talk about what it is that they do, because that's what they love to do, and they want to have more customers themselves. So it all works together in a vast and rhythmic circle. That's very great when you really kind of think intentionally about who you want to work with and who you want to be hospitable to, including your suppliers. Lottie Sheedy of the Neighbourly Bakery, you've also said, once hired, onboarding is a great way to demonstrate how these values filter through into the physical business. So we've touched on that a bit already, but it was definitely something that I definitely want everyone to go away from here thinking about, is how would you onboard, especially in a time and space where it's all quite constricted. So thinking about that is really key. So number 4, so we're back on what kind of behaviours would you like to exist in your business that supports your vision. So Debbie, you said patience with people. It takes a lot of energy to be patient with both staff and customers, but it's worth it. In the heat of the moment, it's the first thing to go, but it pays to keep calm and replace scrunched up eyebrows with a smile. And I guess this goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, Rav, with, you going to work at a place where you thought it was going to be one way, but then it turned out to be another. It's kind of like the disconnect between, and probably the people that you went to work with, they started off wanting to create whatever kind of space that they wanted to create, but in the heat of the moment, or in the sort of exhaustion of the years of doing it kind of, things like this can slip away. And I think it's very easy for us all to sit around talking about, these ideal workplaces, but it's really important to remember that in the heat of the moment, things can go really awry. So again, how do you really embed behaviors that exist everywhere, not just when everyone's happy and everything's going really well and there's no stress?
I think honestly, managing heat of the moment behavior is so difficult, and I've seen it obviously go very south in a lot of places that I've worked in. People that have seemed the most calmest have lost it during service. But I think the link between that is the pressure that you're under from your bosses, perhaps, that's going to enable you to lose it, but also like understanding that it's actually just food at the end of the day. And I think if you have compassionate owners who really encourage you on a daily basis to sort of sit into what it is that you're doing and not put too much unnecessary pressure on you, is going to help you to stop doing that. But sometimes there's factors that you can't control and people will lose it because of outside factors. That's hard. Then it's a conversation of how do you manage that person and how do you manage what it is, that behavior, and it not affecting other people. So very, very complicated. Sometimes it is out of your control. And that's like a leadership thing, right? And how you talk to them.
What's the worst heat of the moment experience you've ever been victim to?
I honestly could talk for days on this. And I mean, at Countertalk, especially with like starting it, one of the biggest things I always tried to do was never publicly out anyone because I don't think it's helpful. But I remember working in a restaurant opening 2 years ago, and the head chef, I was running an event there, the head chef got really angry because there was a massive power play with other head chefs coming in for this event. It was really weird. Anyway, the next day, I'm really into leadership, so I'm reading all my books, and I think it's really interesting to talk to people. But he's an old school chef, and I addressed him and I said, he said, I want to talk to you later, because he was going to tell me off for sort of something really silly. I don't know, taking some of his salt. And I said, well, actually, I'd love to talk to you about your behavior last night. Let's definitely have a chat. But it did not go down well. So what happened was we went into this. Oh, honestly, if I like remember it like it was yesterday. The restaurant had a mezzanine on top. So we've gone up to the mezzanine, and what he didn't realize was during our conversation, all of the owners of the restaurant, there's quite a few of them, and heads came and sat under the mezzanine in the bar having a conversation. And we sat upstairs, and he went to me, so go on, tell me what it is you want to talk about. And I said, if I'm being honest, I had a few complaints about the way you conducted yourself yesterday. And it was a Countertalk event that I was running. And some people complained because it didn't really reflect what it is that we're about. And I thought it was really unnecessary. So let's please talk about that. And instead of that going down well, he picked the table up and slammed it down at me and went across the table and shoved his hand in my face and started screaming at me. And up until then, he'd been quite a calm individual, apart from the night before. And I just remember sort of like, instead of losing it, I just completely relaxed. I don't know what happened to me, but I completely relaxed. But it riled him up even more, and it escalated, it got worse. Anyway, luckily, all of these owners were sat underneath, and he didn't realize what he'd done. But, in the heat of the moment, power plays and like all that sort of stuff can really get to people. And then from that day, that was a really tricky turning point, because he then made my life hell in that restaurant until I ended up leaving. He got fired because he got worse. And then I got brought back because, I was speaking the truth.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. But it's really interesting, because what you demonstrated in that moment was, I always talk about the ego triangle. Have you heard about this?
No, enlighten me.
It's called the ego triangle, or the drama triangle. And it's based on the supposition that almost all human interactions take place within the ego triangle, and the roles that exist in that triangle. And the roles are victim, rescuer, persecutor. And so the trick is, so for example, in that moment, this guy became your persecutor, and was because he felt victimized by you because you were having a go at him and he was in his ego. So he then became persecutor. You could easily have turned victim, or you could have turned persecutor back at him, or you could have turned rescuer, which is like, oh, I'm going to save you from this situation. Don't worry, everything's going to be all right. There, and pandering to the ego. But you did exactly the right thing, which was to get out of the ego triangle and to get into the love circle. And when you were in the love circle, no one can mess with you. Although obviously he continued being riled up because he was so unused to it. But you can't, there's nothing that you can work with when somebody refuses to get into the victim, rescuer, persecutor conversation with that person. And it's obviously the heat of the moment. We all go into the ego triangle. We all go into it all the time. But it's really good to even be aware that it exists and be able to recognize it in other people when they're doing it, and rather than take it personally or feel victimized by someone being an asshole, to remember they're just in their ego, poor them, I'm not going to go there, and not let it ruin your day. And the more you practice that, the less ego you have to be around. It's amazing. So everyone think about that. It's really helped me. It's one of the best things I've ever learned, actually, just remembering it's not personal. It's not about you, it's about them, and they're in their ego. And as long as they're in their ego, you can't deal with them, and they've got to come over to you if you jump out of that ego triangle and go into the love space. I think the worst thing that ever happened to me in a kitchen was when I worked on super yachts, and you work on these boats, and the galleys are normally really small, and the owners are incredibly fussy and exacting. And there was a chef that I was working with who got really pissed off with me because I was trying to manage the time, and I'm like, the owners are sitting down and I've poured the wine and I've done this and I've done that, and now it's time for the bread. And he got so pissed off with me. I can't even remember why. I think he was just felt pressurized, even though I thought I was being really mellow. And he opened the oven and he pulled out the bread rolls and he started throwing them at me, saying, "There, take your fucking bread rolls, take your fucking bread rolls." Like, oh my God, but I think I did something similar to you. I think I was just like, okay. And I turned around and walked out, because like, what are you going to do? Throw them back at the person? No, you got to deal with the owners. So you've got to remain calm. So yeah, it's a minefield out there. It's highly stressful. And just, yeah, again, just having lots of moments to come together and remind yourselves that you're all in this together, and don't neglect that. Even if it's a quick time out, close the shop for 5 minutes. Like, if that's what it takes, do it. It's not the end of the world. It's better to have everyone all on the straight and narrow. So, and then Neil, who says to number 4, what kind of behaviors would you like to exist in your business and that supports your vision? Trust within the team. So that's Neil Spackman from Torta. And we were talking about this earlier, trust. I think it's like something that you can get addicted to. Like, if you just accept the fact that in trusting people, yes, maybe every now and again, you might have that trust betrayed, but it's not as likely as constantly going around thinking everyone's out to get you, and just living your life like that. It's very relaxing. You trust your instincts to hire people that get what you're about, that are going to be faithful to what you're trying to do, that you're going to look after, and you just let them get on with it. And it's just very calming. And if something happens that goes against that, well, don't kind of let it change your whole view. Like, it's all about how you decide to go through the world, right?
Massively. And I think it's very easy, especially with a lot of small food businesses, where you feel tied to every single element, that you think everyone is sort of there to steal from you. And I think one of the more powerful things is actually letting go and putting trust in everyone else, because then it lets them put their guard down, right? And I think it's a mutual trust thing. It's a mutual thing.
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so on to question 5. What are you planning on paying? So lots of you talked about paying the living wage, whether that's the UK living wage or the London living wage. I would like to start off paying the living wage plus £1, lots of you said. And I think, this is following on from some of the stuff Nick spoke about last week in night class. Just, the living wage is great, obviously, but in a world of transient team and people that maybe it's not their only job, how can you try and garner loyalty and people's heads not getting turned by the next person that's also paying the living wage? Obviously, it's working on all of the stuff we're talking about, but money's important too. Rav, now I know you have a lot of dealings with this because you're constantly posting job roles which have salaries attached to them.
Yeah, I think firstly, competition is massive, especially in this sort of area where people can switch very quickly. So you've got to give people a reason that extends beyond the pay for them to want to stick around, because there are so many companies who are going to be offering the same pay, if anything, a tiny bit more. And what you want is you want to breed like loyalty within your staff. And I think a lot of that comes from the difference between caring about them and asking them about them, what they do. And, you know, what we said earlier about all people want is for you to care about them, right? Everyone just wants to feel heard and seen. So that is your massive difference when it comes to paying. You can pay everyone the same, but just caring about them so that they'll return and that they want to work for you. And also instilling, if you don't have strong values and if people see through them, it's going to come through very easily. So you've got to have values that you live and breathe and then also care about them. That actually breeds more than financial, in my point of view. And I've just written an article, actually, it's going to go on Countertalk this week, about demystifying pay and encouraging people to sort of, a lot of people, when they look at job ads, look directly at the pay straight away. Well, I think it's actually so much more important to look at the other factors. And I've written an article about how much I've been paid throughout the industry, because I think if you talk about that in a transparent manner, more people will sort of believe you, if that makes sense. I was happiest when I was at £7.50 in a restaurant, one of the restaurants I worked in. £7.50 wasn't much, but I just loved it. I was so happy. I got the days off that I asked for. People cared about me. And I think that said so much more, and there was so much more of an opportunity to learn. So when it comes to pay, yes, pay is important, but look at what you can do beyond that. And also when it comes to pay people when you say you're going to pay them. Because the minute you don't, that's when you lose the trust. And that's when things like stealing happens. Honestly, it really does. And people think it's acceptable to take one of your pots or pans home. I've seen it happen so many times in restaurants where people just steal a plate here and there or a piece of silverware. It's crazy because you don't respect them. So paying people on time is very, very important.
Yeah, people want to get their own back. It's a natural human response, isn't it? Retribution. Yeah, we see it. We see it all the time. So finally, and then we're going to go on to the questions. What benefits would you like to offer? So lots of you talk about having trips, exploratory trips, Enrico says, with the team to discover and learn from suppliers, like visit farmers. Trips are obviously, you know, the most amazing thing to do at Curb. They've worked incredibly well. We've done lots of away days to farms, and we've even been abroad back before COVID. It's an amazing team. I nearly said family, because we always talk about ourselves as family, but there's a whole conversation to be had around that. But yeah, team bonding, it's just incredibly powerful. But again, like we were saying earlier, going to visit your suppliers, we would love to host you and love to tell you more and love for you to all kind of talk about what they're doing more. In a world where you're just starting out, it's not necessarily something you're going to have the money to do, although you can be clever about it and just carve out some time and literally get on a train or something and go down to whatever the farm might be to kind of really go and learn about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the big research trip to Mexico, which I know, Neil, you've spoken about. But it's really good to have those goals in mind. And when we're talking about incentives, which a lot of you also talked about in your homework, just right, if we manage to smash this much in the next 3 months or whatever, we're going to make enough money that we can all go away, or whatever it is. And it's obviously easier when your team is smaller. So it's quite a good way of, actually delivering on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do the whole trip thing, you want it to be with a team of people that really want to go away with, right? Otherwise, it's wasted.
Yeah.
I remember Dom at Paradise Soho, before he opened, he took his opening team to Sri Lanka, which is like unheard of, amazing. But he did it, which was really interesting.
Yeah, it really just shows, again, it garners trust and loyalty and devotion and admiration, and like, wow, they did that for us. Because as you said, so many people are used to working in environments that aren't that great. And hopefully more and more people will come to demand and expect better working environments, which is the whole point of Countertalk. But there's still so many people that just don't, they're just surprised when somebody, does nice stuff for them. So another thing we talked about, definitely good food on the job. We've already spoken about that, that Debbie said. This is from Kira: paid day off on your birthday and work anniversary. And we were talking about this. It's just such a easy thing to do. It's such an easy win to just acknowledge that they even have a birthday, acknowledge how long they've been working with you, and give them some time off. It doesn't cost you that much, and it feels great to the person, like they're really valued.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's so much more you can do, but also really tying in when you have a team of, I think you've got to make the connection between employer and employee, because equally, if you instill your values and all the lovely things you do to your employees, they'll respect you back, and then it will sort of breed into one. I think often there's a really awful disconnect between employees thinking that the employer is really rich or that they're rolling in it, or that, so you've got to open up a bit to them and explain how it's going.
Exactly. And then it all comes back to transparency, which is something I really admire about what you guys are doing, really. And the way you've opened up, Rav, about all the things that you've done, like how did you get your cookbook deal and stuff like that. It's such a key element to think about for all businesses, especially going forward, coming out of all of this stuff that we've had, because there's been so much conversation about labor, exploiting labor. Where does the labor, as in the workforce, sit within the hospitality industry? They're so often invisible. Transparency is, I'm obsessed with it. I'm trying to think of ways that we can do more of it. And one of the ways that we've thought about, which anyone can do, is just distilling, okay, this is the money that's come in, this is the money that's gone out, almost like an infographic. Because, people can look at spreadsheets and start getting a bit blind and it's all a bit overwhelming. But if you just go, this is the amount of money that came in, this is the amount of money needed for this, that, or the other, like we did it with the burger in Business Week, just kind of like broke down, this is how much the bun cost, the lettuce, the tomato, and then the labor and all the other elements. But just, you could do the same for your own business, so people can see, yeah, okay, you might have brought in X amount of money and I might have like handled it personally myself, a lot of it, but actually that only amounts to such and such. But then kind of engendering trust by saying, but with that amount, if we make X amount, then you can have some of it. You can get a bonus, whatever it is. Just like, again, being more of a we kind of situation than an I and you situation.
Yeah, transparency breeds so much more trust, doesn't it? Between, like, opening a small business is so hard. Be honest with your staff about it, but obviously not to a point where they feel guilty. But and then also be honest with your customers. Definitely, I love businesses who are honest about how much some things have cost or what they're doing, because then it makes me think, oh, okay, well, they're not just they haven't just got a shiny investor behind them. I want to pay for this and I want to put more in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And I think we are living in an age right now where trust has been hugely diminished, particularly amongst team and employees and employers, and, wider issues in the world as well. And it's just, this is a moment for, how do you think about creating, engendering more trust and being more transparent, being more like real? That's like the main message of the last year, is just like being more real, because people are fed up of the veneer. Final thing before we go on to some questions is Lottie has said that she is going to offer a cake allowance, which I think sounds like a fantastic idea. Rav, did you ever get given a cake allowance?
I didn't, but I'd like to come and work for Lottie, just so I can.
Yeah, well, you got to look out. You got to look out for Lottie's business, the Neighbour Bakery. Okay, that's brilliant. So thank you everyone for your homework and your thoughts around this. It's really great to hear you really thinking about it and imagining this wonderful future team that you're all about to nurture. So first question is from Anil Idnani from Bombay Talkies. Hi Anil, how do you approach a difficult conversation if one of your team members is not doing their fair share of the work?
Wow, this happens a lot. And that's all to do with being a strong leader and how you communicate with someone without putting them down, right? And actually, I bought some books. I told Petra I'd bring some books with me. But whenever I've led pastry teams, I've had to do a lot of difficult conversations. And often it's really tough, but these books have helped me the most. Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, incredible, incredible. I cannot advocate it enough. It may seem woo-woo, but actually it's very powerful when it comes to talking to a team. And then also Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. If you don't like reading, by the way, just listen to their talks on YouTube if you don't like reading. And that will give you a lot of insight into how to talk to your staff in a powerful way, rather than like a way that's going to breed distrust and embarrassment, right? It's really hard to have conversations like that.
Yeah, we're going to put links to those books in. And Brene Brown's also got a podcast, Dare to Lead, which is brilliant. Have you listened to it, Rav?
I haven't, but I saw it in your links and I clicked it immediately, like start it. Yep. I'm gonna listen to that.
She's got some really powerful conversations in there. And I put the one about cultural renovation, which is really fantastic, especially for now, for companies who are going, oh my God, I've got to change everything culturally. How do I do it? Yeah, really powerful. So Anil, I hope you go and get hold of those books, whether it's on Audible or whether it's in the flesh. I think it's really important to read if we can, or I love listening to audiobooks as well, and walking as I'm doing it, just getting away from the screen. I keep on mentioning it throughout the course content, get away from the screen as much as you can. And I need to do it more as well myself. So yeah, very important. So from another question from Cheyenne Amini, both. What are some of the things, apart from pay, that have worked for you to minimize staff turnover? And number two, in the event staff leave, how can you protect your food secrets and IP? Rav, do you want me to go?
Why don't you answer the first? I've got some thoughts on this, but you go first, please.
So what are some of the things, apart from pay, that have worked for you to minimize staff turnover? We've got a history at Curb of really holding on to our team, and we've always been really proud of that. And lately we've been kind of, in a world where everything's changed so much, we've kind of been thinking, well, it's really good to hang on to your staff, and it's really wonderful. But also there comes a point in some cases where especially when you've grown together for so long, and I'm not trying to like throw the cat amongst the pigeons with everything we've been talking about, but when you've grown together for so long, people get into habits, and it is like a family, and things just get forgiven and whatever, and it's really nice, but you also have to bring in fresh blood to shake things up. And so it's been really interesting. So if, a year or so ago, we'd be like, oh no, we don't want to lose anyone. We want to keep people. And we're so happy that we do keep people. Now we've kind of come to think of it as like, oh, maybe it's a positive. It's always sad to say goodbye to people. Like, we've been really lucky. We've had incredible people work with us, and they've been incredibly loyal, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid. Like, they've been really into what we're doing. And I think it's really about all of the stuff we've been talking about. Just like, for me, it's always been really important that people just manage their own time, that they get treated like adults, that if they're not coming in one day, it's not like, oh my God, what are you doing? It's like people work at all kinds of different hours, and some people work better in the mornings, and some people work better in the evenings. Some people like to work at the weekends. It's kind of like letting people decide for themselves and not chasing up on them, and just having a business that you're excited about, that other people can get involved in their different ways as well, and that's kind of dynamic and's got lots of different things going on. But I really just think the trust thing has been fundamental to us retaining staff, and I don't call them staff, I call them team, just in making people feel like they're all part of the solution. And I've always, from the beginning in leadership, just always wanted to hear what other people's opinions were, and wanted to discuss things with them, and wanted to hear what they would do, and make it feel like a we kind of conversation, rather than, right, this is what I'm doing. And yes, it's important to be directional, but it's also really important to like pull on all the different resources you have within your team.
That is so powerful, by the way, about getting fresh blood in and not being afraid of getting new people in. I think that's so powerful, because often we get stuck in a rut, so sometimes it's better to let some people go. But what I would say is definitely onboarding them correctly and getting them on the right foot is very powerful, and it's going to enable high staff retention and people who want to be there. So think about how you onboard someone and get them on board, in the first place, but then also how you offboard them. Are you doing like a follow-up interview as to why they're leaving? It could be really interesting for you in your business and what you improve in the future. There might be things going on that you have no idea about that you'll miss out on if you don't do an exit interview. And I know it can feel really informal in these environments, but that's information that they're going to be brutally honest with you. So I think it's important to offboard, and also don't be afraid to say, hey, I know you're leaving to go and do whatever. I support you in that. But if you ever want to come back, there's a position here for you. That's powerful, right? And then in terms of protecting your food secrets and IP, honestly, I speak about this a lot with different companies because I think there's a fear around not letting your secrets out. And especially in that unnamed bakery that I worked at, there was a lot of secrets that they did not want us to talk about when we left with recipes. But you can either get people to sign a contract when they start that basically says, I won't go and sell these recipes anywhere, which you can do. And I think that's totally fair. But also, if you're just kind and trustworthy with your employee, they're not going to want to go and tell everyone your secrets. So I think there's one thing signing a contract, but then there's another thing in just being like, look, I've worked really hard to do this. And I'm sharing it with you because I really trust you and I think you're great. And however, I'd really just appreciate if you didn't share that with anyone. Food IP is very, very tricky, and you actually can't claim that a recipe is yours. You can change it by 1 gram and then it's someone else's. So I think actually just being like, hey, I've worked so hard, tell them about the journey, sell them the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, till the soil. I think it's just a really good analogy. Till the soil, keep the soil good and able to produce all of the growth and the goods that you're working so hard on. Yeah, it's really tricky because I've seen it loads in the food business. Somebody who's working for someone else and they go off and they literally rip off their whole idea, and suddenly they're in every single market, and the other person's going, "What happened?" And they're completely vulnerable and pissed off, and it's hoping and praying that all of your amazing company culture and leadership, like Rav says, results in people remaining loyal to that regardless of whatever it is that they want to do, and knowing also that everyone in the industry talks, and word spreads, and as soon as I hear about somebody who's done something like that, I just will never go there again, and I will stop other people from going if it's really bad.
Trust people, by the way, because you do not want to waste your money on legal fees. It's not worth it. It's going to cost you a fortune and it's not worth it. Just be nice to people. Save yourself thousands of pounds.
Yeah, right? Do whatever you can to stay out of court, because it doesn't end well for anybody. It's just a pain in the arse, and it's just your life is ruined. So just really try and avoid that at all costs. Okay, so from a question from Lottie Sheedy. Hi Lottie, can you remember when you were made to feel most valued at work?
Actually, yes, I made a note of this. By the way, thanks for asking about BG, Lottie. That's very kind. She's okay. I actually think that it may seem really small, but I have always felt the most valued at work when I get given a cup of coffee, and it's like a really good cup of coffee from the machine as opposed to an instant cup of coffee. I remember working in restaurants, and in the morning when they'd come around and say, hey, who wants a coffee? And you get a lovely cup of coffee, just like the customers would. That was like where I felt most valued. And I think the trust went where I worked in a place where we'd all get those lovely coffees in the morning, and a new head chef came in and said, no, he brought in a kettle and a big pot of Nescafe, and he said, you're all having instant. And from that moment, I honestly saw a massive change in dynamic from a staff point of view, because he would come in the morning with his barista coffee and everyone would be drinking instant. And I think that sets people on the wrong foot. And I broke it down in a Countertalk newsletter last year, maybe a year and a half ago. Like, what does a cup of coffee really cost? 8 pence to produce for you, but longevity in staff in the long run.
Yeah. And you hear about people doing the same with really good bread, for example. So rather than going to Sainsbury's and getting the slice, whatever, just doing a really nice bread order. And people are like, oh my God, it's bread day. It's so exciting. We haven't been able to do it for ages, but we've always done these team breakfasts once every couple of weeks, where a couple of people, it doesn't matter who, you just figure out who you want to do it with, makes breakfast for everyone, and Curb pays for it, but the people in the team make it, whoever it is, 2 or 3 people, and they spend ages kind of planning it and then serving each other, and it's really wonderful. And everyone gets to work a little bit early and sits around and relaxes and talks and enjoys the fruits of someone else's labor, but like their kind of talents at cooking, which is always fun, and it always gets quite competitive, but in a really fun way. So we're running out of time a bit, but let's just do the final 2 questions. So Caris Alonso, hello. How do you display transparency to your customers beyond listing your suppliers or source of ingredients?
Well, can I just really quickly, from a social point of view, when it comes to social media now, the world is changing, and the companies who have been quite contrived and influencers with the shiny, pristine aesthetics are all going, and there's so much talk in sort of like the entrepreneur world and socials about being real. And I think you can do really simple things. Like at Christmas, I sold socks for charity, like 500 pairs of socks. I then did like a follow-up story on exactly how much I spent making those socks, how much it cost me to build a website, how much it cost me to like get the envelope sorted. And that sort of transparency builds people who really care and say, okay, well, she didn't make as much money as I thought, and also she's doing this with it. So I think you can be really clever with the way that you are transparent. You don't have to share everything about how much money you make, but I'm saying things like talk about how you found this amazing candidate who now works with you. It doesn't have to be pay, but open up a bit, you know?
And it's so refreshing. I remember seeing you do that, Rav. It's so refreshing because no one does that.
No one does it. I don't know why.
Yeah, and it's setting a precedent, and it's letting people know it's okay. And back to the whole thing of IP, and I know it's tricky with recipes and stuff like that and literally ripping off somebody's whole idea, but I love the kind of attitude of like, if you're a creative person, there's millions more where that came from, and just let them fly away. You'll have other ideas. Don't hold on to your ideas and imprison them like that's the only idea you'll ever have. You're doing yourself a disservice by not believing that you're going to have more ideas. But yeah, I think it's really incredible that you do that, and surprising how little it happens, but it's incredibly inspiring to do it more, all of us. So thanks for the inspiration. Final question from Seb Air. Hi Seb. Hey both, do you have any tips of maintaining leadership in an environment where I'd probably be the least kitchen trained of the staff?
I think being honest about that is like one of the best things you can do. And actually, Sebastian, kitchens haven't worked for a really long time because there's a problem with leadership. So coming in from a fresh angle is way better. And I think that you can use that to your advantage and sort of do it from scratch. And if you have a team that respects you, then more power to you.
Yeah, and going back to enthusiasm being 80% of all sales, going back to your vision being so clear. I know, Seb, you've been working on this for ages. You've bought loads of your equipment, like you're really into this. You really want to do this. And that's just so spiriting to work for somebody who really cares and is passionate about what they're doing. It rubs off on people and hopefully diminishes any of that like kitchen ego stuff where people are so used to doing it a certain way. You might do it in a completely different way, and that will be a fresh pair of like eyes on the whole thing. So I agree with that. Own it. Do whatever training you can. Go and do whatever research you can. I mean, you could go off and I know you're doing pizza. You could go off and do a little adventure somewhere, to even if it's just within Britain, like who's making really great pizza around the country, or go and knock on Pizza Pilgrim's door. They'd love to come do some training with you, I'm sure. Like they're another incredibly transparent company. Yeah, I think again, just own it, and no one can mess with you if you own it. So listen, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you everybody for all of your questions. Thank you for doing your homework. Thank you for inputting and sending all the stuff in that's given us so much to talk about tonight. Rav, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You're someone who's got loads going on at the moment, so really appreciate you swinging by tonight and sharing so much of your insight with us. thank you for creating Countertalk, and everybody get involved with Countertalk, and you can do that right now. You can literally go on their Instagram and start engaging on all of the different amazing things they're talking about right now. You don't have to wait until your business is all ready. You can start creating your community on there now. So we're going to wrap up there, and you're going to get your Sustainability Week content tomorrow. Get ready for that one. Very much a minefield. Treat it with an open mind. Don't get overwhelmed. And we'll see you next week for Sustainability Week night class. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rav, and take care.
Thank you.